Hello, dear friends, and welcome back to part 2 of this whispered flip through of a wonderful photographic book, Memories of Britain's Past, the illustrated story of how we lived, worked, and played by Juliet Gardner. I picked this book up at a local charity shop, and this is the first time I flipped through it. So as I'm seeing these images for the first time, I'm seeing them along with you for the first time. But it's proving a very, very interesting and illuminating discovery of how Britain lived, worked, grew up, and we are now up to chapter 3 where we lived. So without much further ado, let's have a look. That's how we lived. Town or country, a revolution took place in British housing in the 20th century. Before the First World War, 9 out of 10 families lived in rented homes, many of them in poor condition. By the end of the century, millions of new homes had been built, millions more rejuvenated, and more than 2/3 were owner-occupied. Here we have an image of a woman passing the time of day with a neighbour as she scrubs the pavement in front of her terraced house in William Street off Argyle Street in Birkenhead, Merseyside. And in July 1944, this was keeping the front doorstep immediate patch of pavement clean was a matter of pride for many working class women. I mean, when I think of old urban Britain, I really do think of these cobbled streets and terraced homes. Here we have a typical street in Ilford, east of London, which is quite near to me actually, and actually looks quite a lot like that still to this day. Always the same long rows of semi-detached houses, wrote George Orwell of the 30s, penchant for suburban development. Out-of-town estates required new standards in roads to accommodate the demands of cars as well as commuters. Here we have a suburban householder helped by his children polishing the family's standard 8 outside their home in 1953. I always remember that as a fond memory, helping my dad wash the car. Here are children keeping pace with the Salvation Army band marching through the streets of Halifax in West Yorkshire in 1964. Here's a quote from Grace Fawkes, a resident of a new estate in Hornchurch in Essex in the 1930s. "We are all so proud of our houses, and each occupier named his house. Ours was called Arcadia, which means simple happiness. That's what we had." It's lovely. Here are two boys making their way home along a grassy track on Lewis and Harris in the Outer Hebrides in 1955. Connected by a narrow isthmus into one landmass, Lewis and Harris jointly constitute the largest island in the Western Isles. Reminds me a little bit of the Banshees of Inisherin, a great Martin McDonagh film I watched recently. Here are curious villagers and visitors inspecting the wares up for auction in a house clearance sale. In a picture postcard cottage in Chipping, Camden, Gloucestershire. I mean, that is chocolate box England, isn't it, if ever I saw it. Thatched cottages, village green. Here is a parish pump. A woman in 1950 filling a bucket from a tap at the Green at Wark, a modest Northumbrian village on the North Tyne River that was once the capital of Tynedale. And construction kit homes. A mother sees her small daughter off to school from their prefab in Bromley by Bow in 1946. So prefabs are intended as emergency housing to last for 10 years, but stood for much longer. You actually see quite a lot of that around here as well. You have BASF constructions around my area in Essex, which is similar to this. Buildings that were steel constructions that were essentially supposed to be temporary, but have, lasted for nearly 100 years now. But you do have to get a special type of mortgage for them as well, so it means actually buying them can be quite challenging. Here is George VI's consort, Queen Elizabeth, the mother of the Queen. Well, the past Queen now, rest in peace, unveils a plaque to commemorate the opening of Malcolmson House house, a new block of flats on the Tapestry estate in Westminster in 1949. I bet they're probably $1 million each now in that location. Post-war development built on the side of the Woolwich Arsenal. Thamesmead was planned by the Greater London Council as a large social housing project for up to 100,000 people. Bit dystopian. Street games. Classic. We have boys of various sizes playing Hi Jimmy Knacker against a wall in 1950. Whatever that game is, it looks like these children are leaning over each other, almost forming a bridge, and is that child climbing above them, leapfrogging them? I don't know. Game of street cricket in Millwall near the Thames in 1938, with the funnels of a ship dominating the skyline. Of course, snow always makes a welcome change, and they're enjoying sliding around on an icy road in the Isle of Wight in 1940. A young brave shoots from a goal hole in a game of cowboys and Indians played in a London street. The youngest child and her doll are the centre of attention outside a house on Bath's Royal Crescent in 1955. And here we have children playing hopscotch at a community centre run by the Make Children Happy charity near St Catherine's Dock. What I love about children is that it doesn't matter how much technology advances as well. You'll always find games like this when children get together, and just how pure and innocent it is, and how lovely it is to see children invent games. A house did not become a home until people put their stamp on it with their own possessions. Here's tea time in Wales. Clothes airing overhead on a pulley operated rack. Modern living. A housewife preparing dinner in a fully fitted galley kitchen in 1968. I mean, that stood the test of time. You see a lot of kitchens that still look like that to this day. Washing day. A woman struggling with her washing line across the street in Halifax in 1964. Could you imagine you put fresh clothes out and then these fume-spewing cars drive underneath it, smog up all of your fresh clothes? And as the middle classes learned to be without servants, mechanical and electrical aids were increasingly welcomed. Here's a woman vacuuming her curtains in 1937. You kind of forget about that, of course many people in certain classes throughout the ages would have expected certain support and servants working for them, and how jarring that would be when, just as the case throughout history, when people had relied on other people for their support, for better or worse, usually worse, that they'd have to replace them with technology. And of course you see that now, don't you, with artificial intelligence maybe making way for people not relying on individuals for perhaps clerical or administrative work. It's so interesting how society and civilization moves in these repetitive cycles. Here are Lord and Lady Sackville at home at Knoll, their family estate near Sevenoaks in Kent. Rather grand fireplace. And London designer Richard Hamilton in his flat, equipped with a bachelor's column, incorporating a cocktail cabinet, lighting control panel, radio, television, screen, bookshelves and a home office. The column went on show at the 1958 Ideal Home exhibition. That's hilarious, a bachelor's column. The Leighton family of Holton near Lancaster anticipated the 60s vogue for space-saving bunk beds when they converted a bus into a family home in 1948. You do see people doing that to this day, don't you, on grand designs and television programs where people make old things into new houses. So it's a trend that has continued to this day. Oh dear, these pages have been stuck together. So, entertainment at home. The radio, of course, coming in around the family gathering around it in 19th of May 1945, after VE Day but before VJ Day. During the war, the radio was an all but indispensable medium for information and entertainment. And here we have the white light from the television screen illuminating the mesmerised faces of children intently watching a programme in 1956. One viewer from the 1950s recalled on Sundays there was a programme called All Your Own with Hugh Weldon, and children who had made cathedrals out of matchsticks would come on and show us how clever they were. It was most annoying. Bah humbug. Here we have 9-year-old Philip Hunter test reading an American Marvel comic to compare it with The Eagle, a British children's favourite. Interesting. Don't think of it being that far back in time, do you? But The Eagle was launched in 1950 and was instantly successful, with the first issue selling 900,000 copies. Wow. We have the Wallaces here spending a companionable evening in their living room in 1946. She's knitting and he is reading a newspaper. Here we have vinyl listening teenage girls playing 78 RPM records on a record player, a much desired object for all young people in the 1950s. A 19-year-old drama student, Veronica Hurst, second from left, playing Monopoly at home in Tooting with her mother and sisters in 1951. Wow, look at this lobbyist here. Manchester man painstakingly crafting a model of a Spanish galleon on his dining room table in 1936. Had women attending a flower arranging class in the Corn Exchange. I would quite like to do that, actually. Arrange flowers. Seems like quite a nice pastime to arrange flowers in a pretty and engaging way. I remember hearing about these Tupperware parties where plastic food containers first developed in the 1930s and the Tupperware brand was launched in 1946. So, pursuing an innovative marketing strategy, the resealable boxes were sold at parties in people's homes where friends and neighbours gathered to experience the products. Tupperware parties. And by the 50s, middle-class housewives were increasingly expected to help their husbands' career prospects by throwing dinner parties. Oh dear. Very patriarchal. A nation of gardeners. Look at this chap here. Wonderful. Allotments playing a crucial role in keeping the nation fed in warm time, but for many gardeners, like this elderly gentleman, contentedly surveying his plot in Devon in July 1954, the tradition of growing vegetables went back far beyond the war. City and suburban gardens are here. Mrs. Graves of Mitcham in Surrey mowing the front lawn of her suburban home, surrounded by herbaceous borders full of lupins. 8-year-old Mr. Webb in his backyard at Samson Street in Camberwell, demonstrating that no space is too small to create a garden. He won 8 prizes for his efforts in March 1939. Well done, Mr. Webb. Wow, look at that image there. Quintessential English property. The author Hammond Innes and his wife enjoying the tranquility of their garden in Kersey, Suffolk in the summer of 1952. The home all at jaunty angles. Queen Elizabeth, the royal consort, inspecting the prize-winning garden of a prefab in Marylebone, London in July 1950. Source of great pride. Digging for victory. Of course, a big campaign during the war to make the country as self-sufficient in food as possible. People converted bombed out homes into allotments, patches. Turned into allotments dug on a bomb site in the shadow of St. Paul's Cathedral, back there in 1942. Here are some postmen inspecting a good crop of cabbages on a vegetable patch outside their post office. Babies sleep in their prams, women plant cabbages at Peckham Health Centre's home farm on Bromley Common. Boys from Drury Falls Council School in Hornchurch arrived for a session on their allotment, and they ran a shop where they sold the vegetables they grew to the public. And an Anderson bomb shelter was not complete until it was covered with a thick layer of earth to help protect it from bomb damage, and here is somebody watering the vegetables they planted on top of the roof in 1943. Here we have some competitors arriving with a flower and vegetable show, organised in 1933. And Percy Thrower, one of BBC Television's gardening experts, potting up geraniums in 1957. Margery Fish from We Made a Garden, 1956. No one can make a garden by buying a few packets of seeds or doing an afternoon's weeding. You must love it, and then your love will be repaid 1,000-fold, as every gardener knows. Here's Mary Burns and other young volunteers taking up spades and forks to clear land in Wood Green, North London, and turn them into allotments in 1976. There is something wonderful about tending to a garden, or tending to nature. British tradition here in terms of feeding the family, preparing a filling Yorkshire pudding to go with the Sunday roast in 1947. I love a Yorkshire pudding. It's basically, if you don't know what a Yorkshire pudding is, it's kind of like it's like batter, just simple batter, but in a roasting tin, and it rises, and there's like a well in the centre. So it's kind of like a batter cupcake, and just it collects gravy, etc. from your roast dinner well. Just absolutely delicious. Here we have 3 generations of the Maycock family, all living in the same house in Twickenham in Middlesex, to sit down at Sunday dinner in 1946. And a West Indian-born father sits with his daughter at the kitchen table in their Birmingham home. His mother puts the finishing touches to dinner. Or a farmhouse kitchen here. 16th century Essex farmhouse in 1949. I mean, it's so interesting, isn't it? It just looks so ancient, but it's only 1949. Roundtrees. They'd been in business for 90 years in 1953 when an advert for their jelly appeared, and a housewife and daughter checked the groceries in the weekly shop of 1955. Many of their brands are still on sale and familiar today. Yeah, Saxa Salt, Tate and Lyle. Bachelors. Interesting. Tide. In 1946, London housewives wait in line to collect their meat ration from a butcher's shop in Wembley. Rationing continued for 9 years in Britain after the end of the war, which is amazing. If you think about it, like right up until 1954, you would have been experiencing rationing well after the war had ended. So, I suppose a little bit like many of us had to live through during the pandemic of only being able to buy a certain amount of items. Could you imagine for nearly a decade having that? Just glad Facebook wasn't around at the time. People would have been calling out a conspiracy for withholding food to some sort of new order or something. Here is a married couple posing in 1969 outside a small greengrocers and grocery shop that they run in the market town of Dolgellau in Wales. And of course found it difficult against large expanding supermarket chains like this one, a Tesco supermarket in the Elephant and Castle, South London in 1970. Oxo cubes, first introduced in this country. Actually, no, they were first produced, in Germany in 1866 as ancient. I didn't realise it was that far ago. The name dates from 1899, became an essential ingredient for most home cooks. Here we have Philip Harben, Britain's first television cook, making soup à l'oignon, one of the 5 fortnightly programmes dedicated to European cookery in 1953. Of course, an incredibly popular format of television show in this day and age. Day out shopping. A smartly dressed woman here inspecting the wares on offer in the window of a Dundee jeweller's shop in 1955. Here we have bargain hunters trying on hats in a London department store in January 1950. wow, you definitely don't get that anymore. Actual models wearing the clothes and people walking around checking it out in a department store. A commissionaire helps a customer to find a taxi outside Fortnum and Mason. There's something kind of New Yorkish about that image, but yeah, it's in Piccadilly in London. The fashion and the style of service, you don't really see that in this country much anymore. A mother and her children examine the goods in the windows of a Woolworths store in 1945, and Marks and Spencer's underwear undergoes close scrutiny in the Oxford Street branch in 1955. A small crowd eagerly surveys the goods on display in the window of Selfridge's Oxford Street, and a shop assistant places a sign indicating how many coupons are required for its purchase. Clothes rationing came into effect in June 1941. It's almost like some sort of video game. Everyone gets the same amount of coupons perhaps, and you have to just choose what you dedicate your coupons to or not. Respec into a nice evening gown or be able to eat. Here we have the clothes designer Mary Quant posing with a French copy of Vogue featuring the model Twiggy on the front cover in 1967. And shoppers enjoying the intimate atmosphere of the Bieber store in Kensington Church Street, which opened in 1965. Looks like somebody's house. These two elderly ladies are photographed in the East End of London in 1960, outside a traditional haberdashery and draper's shop. All prices reduced, final clearance. You can see these shops all struggling with these major branches popping in. Christmas time. In the depths of the Great Depression of the 1930s, housewives were urged to remember, especially in their Christmas shopping, the claims of our own country and the empire countries beyond the sea. But for many a child of an unemployed worker, Christmas Day would be much like any other. There might be a silver-wrapped tangerine and a pink sugar mouse, and perhaps a tin whistle for some in their stockings. Here, a child, Christmas lost none of its magic in the early war years. This little girl here, taking advantage of the sandbags to get a good view of Selfridge's window in Oxford Street in 1939. Buying turkeys at auction. Wow, everyone gathering around and a butcher holding up a turkey and they're all bidding for it. Incredible. There's a little girl telling Santa what she wants for Christmas in 1977. Now this doesn't change much to this day. Here are the lights on Oxford Street in 1960. Still look very similar to that. Shopping done. A mother in Bristol uses a wheelbarrow to get her children presents and Christmas tree home in 1935. And here are shoppers in a busy Woolworths at Christmas in 1955. Out and about. I'm loving these images, these big images indicating each chapter. Trains, of course, have been a big part of people's lives in the early decades of Queen Victoria's reign, but steam power was joined by the internal combustion engine, and before long, cars, motorcycles and buses began to displace the horse. Here we have schoolboys in Newcastle upon Tyne in 1950, carefully noting down the numbers of the steam locomotives as they leave Newcastle Central Station. A woman and a toddler give a milkman's horse a sugar lump. Horse-drawn deliveries are still common after the war, and some urban breweries continue to use dray horses well into the 1970s and beyond. That's interesting. Long-distance London to Glasgow coach, operated by the Northern Road Coach Company. That's a long schlep. And some trams running along the Thames Embankment in 1932. Oh wow, so this looks like it's taken at night, but it's taken at midday during one of London's infamous smogs. So polluted that it was so smoggy that it was like night time. I think you may have seen, if you've watched The Crown on Netflix, I think one of the episodes is about a very famous incident I think it was in the 50s. The smog so bad, it caused a lot of injury and death. of cyclists working at the Bristol Aeroplane Company setting off home after a long shift in the factory. And this long queue are waiting patiently for a tram. Very organised. English people, British people do queue very well, I must say. A bus conductor at the rear of a London bus in 1951, making sure all the passengers are safely on board. Here's the Skeel brothers of Cambridge demonstrating their willingness to repair any age or make of bicycle. And a Farewell farmer, proud owner of one of only 2 motorcycles in the island in 1955. He must have been popular. Wow, check that out. A range of cars British made and imported at the 1954 Earls Court Motor Show in London. A Ford Popular was priced at £390. What a bargain. I mean, this is what, 1954, so I wonder what the inflation, probably about 3 or 4 or 5 grand. But still, a good deal. The aeroplane. Wow, look at that image. Looks like an evil building here. And that plane looks like a Meccano or a model kit plane. An Imperial Airways plane at Croydon Aerodrome, the first airport to serve London, preparing for takeoff. Taking off for Paris in 1937. And here we have 3 women setting out to cross the road on a zebra crossing. Marked by an orange Belisha beacon named after Leslie Hall Belisha, the 1930s Minister of Transport in Waterloo Place, Central London in 1956. Here we have holidays and days out. Primary school children running across the playground at the start of their summer holidays in July 1939, and then by the time school started again, Britain was at war. Big old change for them. And there are holiday makers waiting patiently at Waterloo Station to get away for a short break in April of 1946. The station and surrounding area had been badly damaged in the war. I suppose the relief of getting out to go on holiday during such a turbulent time must have been absolutely wonderful. Very famous sight, this. Children enjoying a donkey ride on Blackpool Beach in 1955. That's the Blackpool Tower. Seaside holidays were supposed to offer sun, as this poster promoting their beautiful sands of Redcar promised, but were all too often the reality was paddling about in the rain, like this child and her grandmother on the Blackpool sandy beach in 1945. Classic British holiday weather. That's a lovely image. War workers enjoying a sunny day on a beach surrounded by rugged cliffs on holiday in Cornwall in September 1943. I just love that people wearing straight up suits on the beach. Just everyone turning out very well all the time. The seaside landlady here serving a meal to guests staying at a boarding house in 1952. And jellied eels, holiday grounds in Southend-on-Sea, 1956. I have a video on top 10 strangest English foods, and if you're not too familiar with them, yes, jellied eels is a rather unique concoction. You should check it out. A baby alarm. Oh my, look at that, that's hilarious. Butlins evening babysitting service alerted parents if their children needed them. This notice board was in use at Skegness in 1955. Look how clinical it is. There is a child crying in chalet number R34. Wow. Competitors lining up for the start of a piggyback race at a Butlins holiday camp in 1939. So I don't know what the equivalent might be in other countries, but it's quite a big thing in England where you have holiday camps, places like Butlins, which are like little resorts, I suppose, with caravans and little prefab houses. So you go away and you stay on site and you can explore the area and cycle and relax, but then there will be the central clubhouse, and there'll be entertainment every evening and children's clubs and social events. boys on holiday from jobs in factories and mines, setting up camp above Windermere in the Lake District in 48. And they were organised by a charitable trust, and employers often paid towards the cost. That's interesting. I didn't know about that. And what an amazing place to go. There's Windermere in the background. If you've checked out many of my videos, you'll know I'm absolutely in love with the Lake District. Maybe I'll live there one day, who knows. Here is a little caravan holiday in Berkshire in 1934. Having a good time. In the days before television, we flocked to the cinemas to be transported by the glamour and drama up on the screen. But despite the competition, the theatre held its own, while dance halls throbbed to the beat of big bands. Elderly ladies here chatting over tea and cake at the Ladies' Carlton Club in London. Customers enjoying a sing-song in a pub in Birmingham in 1961. The famous old Guinness adverts, Guinness is good for you. I don't know if trading standards would allow that kind of messaging today. And here are children queuing for a free cinema show during the Christmas holidays in 1937. And then by 1939 there were around 700 Saturday morning cinema clubs in Britain, showing mainly cartoons and westerns. Here we have two teddy boys, which is their hairstyle and suits, photographed outside the ABC at Elephant and Castle. The glory days of cinema were coming to an end. Here we have a night at the theatre. The crowd standing for the Queen Mother here as she takes her seat for the Royal Gala performance of Mozart's Marriage of Figaro at Covent Garden Opera House in May 1963. Looks exactly the same to this day. And excited female fans here at a Tommy Steele concert in February 1957. He was Britain's first homegrown teen idol and rock and roll star, but like so many others would be eclipsed by the Beatles. Here we have teenagers jitterbugging at the Rodney Youth Centre in Liverpool in March 1949. And again, what I find quite interesting about this is how dancing has almost come back around again, in the sense that for many years, particularly growing up with me, there certainly wasn't any formalised dance routines that people would follow. Yes, you'd have certain party songs like the Macarena and things like that, and the Music Man, where everyone would play along, but there wouldn't be like dances like the cha-cha-cha or the jitterbug or the twist or whatever that people would do to music. But now, of course, to this day, you've got things like Fortnite and the game promoting many styles of dance, and kids and other young people just busting out all sorts of moves to music. And in a way, it's like bringing back a formalised sense of dance that people can share in and coordinate and synchronise with. I think it's quite lovely. Playgirls at Playboy. Here we have croupiers dressed as bunnies, complete with ears and a bobtail, serving the tables in the main casino at London's Playboy Club in 1966. A very outdated image there. And an espresso machine used at the Lobster Pot Coffee Bar near Piccadilly Circus. I bet that was a hit when it was first introduced. There's a very stoic scene, the Cafe Royal in Piccadilly, London. Here we have Chinese restaurants, which was still a rarity when this photo of the Canton and London Docklands was taken in 1955, but there was a large Chinese population in the neighbourhood. By 1970 there would be some 4,000 Chinese restaurants and takeaways, as they opened up in practically every town in the country. Love a Chinese takeaway. Taking part in, or at least watching sport, almost defines being British. The thwack of leather on willow in summer, the mud of the soccer or rugby match in winter. What are you doing saying soccer? This is an English book, is it not? Let's say a football or rugby match in winter have forged an indelible mark on the national character. Here we have a July meeting at Goodwood in Sussex, a 4-day feast of horse racing, blessed with fine weather. Classic image there of knitted handkerchiefs being used as hats. Billy Little, playing for Liverpool, takes a corner during a match against Burnley in April 1950. That looks like a bit of a squash and a squeeze, doesn't it? A mudfest. Eton's boys take a rest after competing in the school's annual cross-country run in February 1935. The first was run in 1846. Well, some of these boys really look like they've been through it. There's one here, never doing it again. Spectators at the Greyhound track in Brighton in August 1939. Family-friendly gambling. Is there such a thing? An archetypal local cricket match being played in the village of Blackton in Somerset, but it could be almost anywhere in England. And in any decade since the 30s, and here are some West Indian supporters celebrating their team's victory over England at the Oval in the fifth and final test of the series in 1963. A joyous occasion. Of course, we have here a very famous sporting event, the Oxford and Cambridge University boat race. It's been contested over a 4-mile course on the River Thames from Putney to Mortlake since 1829, taking place at the end of March or beginning of April. Very popular event to this day. A major English sporting event, of course, Bobby Charlton raising the Jules Rimet trophy in the air following England's 4-2 victory over West Germany in the World Cup final at Wembley on the 30th of July 1966. And here we have heavyweight boxer Henry Cooper warming up with a punch bag in 1966. He fought Muhammad Ali twice, remains the only British boxer to have won the Lonsdale belt 3 times. And here we move on to British celebrations. Morris dances here. Very English sight. Morris dancing would be, dancing in a particular style, waving these handkerchiefs to either an accordion or lovely thatched cottages in the background there. That's so English. The Empire, coronations and jubilees of kings and queens, the end of the war, such events form the basis of Britain's landmark national celebrations in the 20th century. Here are Remember Empire Day, the 24th of May. That's obviously something that doesn't really happen anymore. For the better, but they are enacting a pageant to celebrate Empire Day in 1934. And spectators on the street of a pavement in London awaiting the arrival of an Empire Day procession. But by this time, independence movements were gathering pace around the world. Britain's empire did not have long to run, and in 1958 Empire Day was rebranded British Commonwealth Day. God bless good King George. Flags and bunting decorating a street in Stepney in London's East End to mark the silver jubilee of George V in 1935. And cheerful despite the rain, spectators watching the rehearsal for the coronation in 1937 of King George VI from a car roof. And the label of the non-alcoholic champagne below was specially prepared to mark the event. Cheerio, a kingly drink. Here we have factory workers in the East End of London, photographed for the Daily Herald in April 1945, preparing flags and banners in anticipation of victory in Europe. And the funeral cortege of Sir Winston Churchill here, war leader and former Prime Minister, passing slowly down Whitehall on its way to St Paul's Cathedral on the 30th of January 1965. An Observer journalist on Churchill's funeral here. This was an act of mourning for an imperial past that marked the final act of Britain Britain's greatness. Here we have the Festival of Britain. Britain needed a pat on the back after the long years of war and austerity, so in May 1951, 100 years after the Great Exhibition of 1851, the Festival of Britain opened on a reclaimed bomb site near Waterloo Station. The aim of the event was so that this country and the world could pause to review Britain's contribution to world civilization and the arts of peace. Looking out over the Thames from the Ships and Sea Pavilion was a sculpture called The Islanders by Siegfried Charroux, an Austrian artist who'd settled in Britain, and a promotion team with a travelling expedition that took the festival around the country. Artist Victor Passport work on the abstract designs for one of the restaurants. And down here we have Edward Mill's multicoloured cocktail cherry screen, erected at the edge of the site to distract the eyes of visitors from neighbouring bomb sites. Here we have the iconic steel skylon designed by the architects Moyer and Powell at a fairground ride in Battersea Park. That looks almost alien. That is incredible, that, isn't it? Here we have a family in Fulham, in London, leaving Little Town to the support of the Queen, taken on the 3rd of June 1977, 4 days before a Silver Jubilee celebration. They're big fans. And here we have smiling children waving flags on the 7th of June 1977 for the Silver Jubilee. Special occasions, like weddings. Here we have bridesmaids gathering at the reception following the wedding of the 18-year-old Rain McCorkadale, Deb of the Year in 1947 to Gerald Legg in 1948. Rain was the daughter of the novelist Barbara Cartland and future stepmother of Princess Diana. And here we have some newlyweds showered in confetti in Pentworth, Sussex. Wartime weddings. Of course, people deciding to get married before conscription, before they could be separated. So we had very practical weddings here. Look at that. Amazing. Here in the village of Solmstead in Berkshire, bride looks on as a matron of honour puts the finishing touches to a young bridesmaid's outfit. In November 1940, a bride steps out of a bomb-damaged home onto a carpet run especially laid for her up to the garden path. A Scottish bride, Jean, leaves the army-based chapel with her American GI husband, Sergeant Nathan, following a service conducted by the US chaplain in September 1944. A young Navy stoker gazes happily on his beaming bride after their marriage at St. George's Church in Hanover Square on the 16th of November 1939. And the lack of a wedding dress cannot dampen this bride's happiness on marrying her soldier sweetheart in London on the 4th of October 1939. Something very romantic about hasty weddings in wartime, and tragic. Check out that cake. Whoa. The chief confectioner at the cake and biscuit manufacturer McVitie and Price puts the finishing touches to the 4-tiered cake destined for Princess Elizabeth's wedding reception. And here Princess Elizabeth and Prince Philip of Greece walking down the aisle of Westminster Abbey before a congregation of 2,000 guests. And here we have young women camping out on the roadside for the procession route to capture a glimpse of Prince Charles and Princess Diana. Wow, that's a great image of Sikh wedding here. Kuljit Singh marrying Kaur Groel at a hotel in Britain in July 1965. It's a shame that's in black and white. I bet the colours are amazing. People raising their glasses to toast a golden wedding anniversary at a party in the Hope and Anchor pub in Brixton in 1969. Changing aspirations here. Wearing gowns and mortarboards, young women celebrate receiving their degrees at the University College of Cardiff in July 1986. And here, 17-year-old Anna Massey dances with a Deb's delight at her coming out ball, holding a pink and white striped marquee decorated with 30 stag heads and 89 yards of imitation pearls at her family home in Highgate. At the time, Massey was making her debut as an actress in William Douglas Holmes' play The Reluctant Debutante. So it's a strange concept. Debutante. Released upon society. And here we have all smiles as Mrs. Buller holds her son Nigel Guy with her husband beside her at the baby's christening. A calendar of tradition. Here we have New Year's revellers celebrating the chimes of midnight ringing out on 31st of December 1969 in Albert Square in Manchester. Shetlanders surrounding an elected member of the Lewick Up-Heliar Committee dressed in full Nordic costume as he photographs the event. Held on the last Tuesday in January, commemorates the Norse invasion of the Shetland Islands in the 9th century. Piping in the haggis at a Burns night dinner in the Savoy Hotel in London, 20th of January. A piper leads the way, followed by the chef carrying the haggis and a waiter bearing bottles of whisky to help the poetry flow. And here we have anxious owners parading wire-haired fox terriers before the judges at Crufts Stock Show in April 1948. It's been running since 1886 and a pretty massive show to this day. Here you have the runners in the pancake race at Olney, Buckinghamshire in 1955. It dates back, this tradition, to 1445, although the race hadn't been run for many years until revived in 1948. Yes, running with a pancake in a frying pan. This is what I love about the English traditions and the customs, where it starts to get a bit weird. But here we have a Jewish mother in Whitechapel in London lighting the Sabbath candles on the 12th of April 1952 at the climax of the Passover feast, which commemorates the Exodus from Egypt, and Druids conducting the dawn ceremony at Stonehenge at the summer solstice, the longest day of the year, 21st of June 1956. Here we have the Maypole. I mentioned this in my Places of My Life video of Bullock's Hill, where this would often be on village greens in the 1950s, dancing around a maypole at Cheriton Village School near Wincanton and Somerset. So you run round and round and round in different ways and different styles, some children going that way, some children going that way, and it plats the pole with multicoloured threads. It looks very nice when it's finished. And wow, that is the original pyramid stage in 1971. Look at the size of it compared to what it is today. There's like 100 people, not 100,000 people, all crammed around a relatively small pyramid. Wow, that has really progressed, hasn't it? Here's Mrs. Gertrude Schilling making an entrance at Ascot races in 1969. Even by the eccentric hat standards of Ascot, this enormous feather-trimmed cartwheel creation designed by her milliner son David is flamboyant. Wow, you're telling me. Here are opera goers enjoying drinks on the lawn at the Glyndebourne Festival in Sussex in 1976. I love that, a nice music or play or opera in the open air. Here's a garden fete, home ground fairground game here at the village fete in Chislett, Kent. And here we have a wrestling match at the Brownmere Games in Aberdeenshire, Highland Games. Remember the 5th of November, 1961. Lewes in Sussex. And here is visitors gazing at the pine Christmas tree erected in St. Paul's Cathedral in 1953. That looks lovely. Wow, is that it? Yes, that has brought us to the end of the index. Wow, so that was a lovely journey through memories of Britain's past. I'm glad I picked up that book. It had tons of fantastic images and lovely descriptions that I'm sure I'm going to spend a long time reading through. But thank you for joining me for this wonderful journey through the memories of Britain's past, the illustrated story of how we lived, worked and played by Juliet Gardner. I look forward to having you join me next time.